From the studios in beautiful Oceanport, New Jersey, welcome to the biggest and greatest podcast ever. I'm your host, Ray K. Hey everybody, I got an exciting guest today. This is so exciting for me. This is a founder and president of DIS Company. His first start was London Records, and his first projects were with the Moody Blues and Rolling Stones. You know, so that's not a bad way to kick off a career. I have a first-time publicist on my show. Clients include Mickey Dolenz and Debbie Gibson. I used to like her back in the 80s when I was younger. She's still out there. Worked with Madonna. Wow, this is impressive stuff. Photography, a whole bunch of stuff. Public relations, publicists. Hey, I'd like to welcome on my show David Salidor. David, welcome.
Hey Ray, nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you. And I like to ask you this because it's such a unique name of a company, and
right.
DIS Company. Tell me the story. I know you have something with this. Tell me how that came about.
Well, you know, it's funny. When I started my company in 1984, you know, you kind of think, you know, do you want to name it like Apple, or do you want to put your name, or do you want to use your initials? And I opted for using my initials. Now, the funny thing I want to mention is that in the 80s, you know, when disco was, you know, even before they called it dance music, they called it disco. Mm-hmm. And it, you know, it angered a lot of people, but I changed the logo to kind of say DISCO.
Okay.
So people back then would just say, hey, disco, hey, you know, and, you know, some people still do that to this day. It was just one of those funny things that I didn't even really notice it until someone pointed it out to me. And I said, boy, this is a great marketing thing. And we did do a lot of the, you know, the disco acts back then. We did the Village People, and we did Donna Summer, and worked with a lot of the labels. But, you know, when disco became a dirty word, you know, and people were burning their disco records, I said, you know, now's the time to change the logo back to, you know, either my name or just the DIS Company. So
okay.
There you go.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, let's start back on your first gig,
Right.
and how you got into the whole thing, and that very first concert, which I found pretty wild. So just talk about how you got into this.
Well, my father and my mother were actually both in the business, and my father worked for a company that most people will not remember, but it was called Decca Records.
I remember it.
And
I remember the Beatles. He turned down the Beatles, right?
Yeah, and well, you know,
or there's a real story, I'm sure, but yeah.
Technically, it was English Decca. My father worked for the U.S. counterpart of the label, and he had to put up with that story, you know, for decades. And I've kind of, you know, listened to it, and I try to correct it when I do.
Okay.
But, you know, I was in college. I was working for a radio station out on Long Island, WLIR. I was working at this music club called My Father's Place, and that really gave me my first taste, you know, into this whole business. And one weekend I was home, my father was home, and he said to me, he said, you know, I got to go see this act. You know, you want to go with me? And I didn't really want to go, but I had nothing else to do, so I went. To make a long story short, it was The Who. It was on their debut U.S. performance. It was actually... you know, I'm looking at the date right now, July 8th, 1967, at the Lido Beach Club in Lido Beach, Long Island. You know, we kind of lived nearby. And seeing this band, seeing Keith Moon and seeing John Entwistle and seeing Pete Townsend, seeing Roger Daltrey, literally blew my mind.
Wow,
you know,
that
Townsend
much.
Smashed the guitar. Keith Moon had Day-Glow drumsticks. I mean, I watched this. As did the crowd, and I think the crowd was probably as confused as I was, but I knew that I liked it, and that kind of set the, you know, the fuse, if you will, or ignited the match for my interest in music. I mean, I tried to play guitar, very competitive even back then. My first instrument actually was clarinet. Pete Fountain, famous clarinetist, was on Decca Records, and it turned out that Pete Fountain and my father were friends, and Pete Fountain gave my father, for me, one of his signature clarinets. It's a great instrument, very hard to put together, and if you recall, it's with a reed, R-E-E.
Okay.
And you had to kind of lick it and suck it, and just, not too much, or it wouldn't work, but just an art. It was hard.
Okay. Now, is that something that you see kids when they're in like band, when they're like in 3rd or 4th grade and they played a clarinet? Was it like you were that young, or was it even later?
I think I was a little bit older. My memory is that I went through a series of instruments and finally decided on the clarinet. But, how many clarinet players can you name right now?
You're about the only one. Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
But, I'll tell you a funny story. 2 weekends ago, I went to see Wynton Marsalis at Lincoln Center here in New York. It was the closing night of the 31st season at Lincoln Center. It was actually the first show of his I had seen. I couldn't believe it had gone on for so long. I kind of had a pang of feeling guilty. But in his orchestra, there were 3 clarinet players, and I was sitting literally in the second row, and I watched these guys, and they just made the most terrific music. And, I kind of thought, I said, maybe I should have stuck with it, but,
Yeah. Well, you always wonder, like, how do they make livings? Do they just play at these kind of shows? Or, it's, were you on stage with The Who? I mean, you were pretty close.
I'll tell you, my memory is that, the Lido Beach Club was one of these summer beach clubs that a family would go, and they would rent like a bungalow, and they would spend the whole day there, and then they cook in the bungalow. I mean, that was a very big thing in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. And my memory is that The Who, the group, were kind of positioned around the pool, probably there's no one I can go to kind of verify this, but my memory is that they were playing in a semicircle in front of the pool, and the audience and the club members, I guess, were standing on the other side of the pool.
Wow.
I mean, how's that for a memory? No one ever asked me that before, but that's my memory. And in describing it to you right now, it sounds kind of doofy, right? Around the pool. But
so the actual concert was around the pool.
Right.
Huh.
Right. I mean, how many acts can say that? They're, and I think this was on their inaugural tour in America. I think Decca had just come out with their first album. And, it's funny. Someone had asked me when I related this story, they said, do you remember what they played? And I said, no. I said, I was dumbfounded looking at these 4 guys and, jumping and, guitars being smashed and day-glow drumsticks. And of course, the later it got, the darker it got, and you just saw these day-glow drumsticks. And I mean, Keith Moon, from by all accounts was a wild guy, and he was drumming standing up, and he was drumming sitting down. And again, my memory is I couldn't take my eyes off him. I'll tell you a funny story. Flash forward to last November. We were at an event. We were publicizing it called Rockers on Broadway. A bunch of people here in New York have this annual event, and they honor people. And the funny thing is that the guy who runs it met Pete Townsend when he was in The Who's Tommy on Broadway. Remember that?
Yes.
And Pete Townsend was at this show, and he kept asking me, he said, you're going to remind Pete, you're going to remind. And I said, maybe not. I have tremendous respect for Townsend. I always have. But there was a moment when he and I were standing together backstage, and I leaned over, and I said, you remember July 8th, 1967? And he looked at me. He said, I have no memory. And honestly, I bet he did remember because he's a pretty intelligent guy. But it was just funny to see him all these years later. I mean, he's still upright. I'm still upright. And let's be honest, 1967, a long time ago, right?
Yeah. Well, now it is. Yeah. Did you have any favorite groups back then talking about music? I mean, that was the big British invasion era.
I love the Beatles. I love the Rolling Stones, and I love the Who. I was never really a Monkees fan. I kind of watched the show, and it was okay. I didn't really get it.
Well, you were too old for that. You weren't like you were 8 or 9. That was like that audience, or 12. You were older, right? So
yeah, I was a little bit older, but I gave it a shot. So it's ironic when I started with working for Mickey Dolenz in 1994. Thank God he never said to me. He said, "Did you love this show? Did you?" No. But I sometimes think I've gotten into the show now, and because I've been to so many shows, and with 3 of the Monkees or 2 of the Monkees, I kind of gotten into the music. They actually, Davy Jones has passed, Peter Tork has passed. Very sad. I was actually with Mickey when each incident happened, and say what you will, I mean they were like 4 brothers.
Okay, they were. Okay.
And, Mike and Mickey are the only 2 left, and they literally got back Tuesday night from 12 dates in Australia, and I was not there. I think it's like a 28-hour flight, so in a way I'm glad I wasn't there. But the reviews were phenomenal. And the last night of the tour, which probably is going to be the last Monkees show ever, one of the reviews said the headline was, "The Monkees have nothing left to prove." And it was a great headline. I mean, I saw the show when it was on the East Coast earlier this year, and it was just a terrific show. I mean, they had some of the best writers, Neil Diamond and Paul Williams, and Carole King, Boyce and Hart. I mean, just phenomenal songs. And, I'm old enough to really be able to appreciate, like, a really good song. I still do.
Well, the Monkees were so unique. They were almost like a Beatle copycat, was my impression. They were goofy and funny.
Right.
The 4 guys, they had the hair. Each one had that little personality. I guess that gets a different type of audience.
Right. Mickey explains it when he's being interviewed, because obviously that question comes up. He said, it was more of kind of like the Marx Brothers.
Okay.
They were kind of doing shtick, and they were kind of doing improv. And but he said they never ever addressed the question: if these guys could never get gigs, if these guys could never get work, how could they afford a house in Malibu?
Oh, okay. Right. On the
which is
TV
where
show.
the house was.
Right.
Even back then it was expensive. So it's funny how things work out.
Oh yeah.
I never would have thought I would see Pete Townsend in like 2018. I mean, it's something I never thought about, but when the situation came up, I said, "What?" I said, "This is ironic."
Right. Well, you work with some of the greats. I mean, Mickey was actually my favorite Monkee. I mean, everyone seemed to like. If I had to take a poll, but he was probably the most popular one. He's good, the funniest guy, and drums, and he had that charisma. You work with some biggies, but let's talk about your career moving in. So you started your company, and I like to mention this because this is almost mind-boggling to me that this thing started like 35 years ago. I mean, just the longevity factor is almost. Am I right? Or that's kind of amazing.
It's something I try not to think about, but I mean, as the years roll on, and I'm still here, I can't ignore it. I mean, I had worked for 3 of the biggest PR companies before I started my company, but it's like when you work for someone, you do a great job, they get the credit. You do not a great job, and you get the blame. And I moved from one company to another, and it's just, it's very frustrating. I mean, I would always think, well, if I was running this company and I finally in 1984, made that move. I mean, I started working out of my apartment in New York. I mean, it was not very glamorous, but, you know, I started it. And I think in starting a business, that's the hardest thing to do. I mean, back then, today, you know, just getting all the pieces moving in the right direction, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, printing up stationery or printing up cards or, you know, getting like the right office. You know, don't forget, back in 1984, I mean, no cell phones, you know, no computers. I mean, when I would do a press release, I would literally have to engage a messenger to take it here and to take it there. I mean, now, you know, I can wake up in my home and do all the work. I get up every day at 6 a.m. and from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., I get so much work done. It's nice and quiet that sometimes I think I can go to the office a little bit later. You know, I mean, I have to be here. I'm used to doing it. I know the trend is to kind of work out of your home. But for me, I mean, that was really difficult. And you're right. I mean, 35 years later, I don't know where the time went.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is you know, one of the points I wanted to bring up, David, is surviving in the business for that long. What are some of the keys? I mean, how'd you do it? I mean, that's a long time. How do you survive?
Well, you know, excellent question. I mean, I think that if you're in a business like this, and you don't get it, you can't do it, you're going to be in the business for a very short time. I mean, I like to think I'm an affable guy. I can kind of, you know, I mean, you know, Madonna, Run DMC, ZZ Top. I mean, these are three different type of acts, you know, and in a sense, I kind of got along with all of them. You know, you have to persevere, but I mean, you have to know your stuff as well. When I started my business, I'd actually worked for this company, the Howard Bloom organization, which in the 80s, you know, I mean, they had ZZ Top and they had Hall and Oates and they had the Rolling Stones. And let me tell you, working for these guys, paying top dollar, you had to be on your toes. I mean, there was no opportunity to kind of be sluggish. You know, you had to be on your toes. And this fellow, Howard Bloom, who, ironically, I saw 2 weeks ago at a function near New York, was just on it 24/7, you know. And I shared an office with him for 6 months. And, you know, when the opportunity to do that was in front of me, I said to myself, I said, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. I mean, there were a lot of bad things about it, but I mean, I heard him, how he conducted himself and how he worked, and a lot of it rubbed off on me. You know? It's kind of like going to boot camp for like 8 months.
Like going where?
What?
Going where? I missed that. Food?
You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I missed that, what you just said, David. It's like,
no, it was kind of like going to boot camp.
Oh, boot camp.
For like 8 months. I mean, every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I mean, I was in this guy's office and I was, you know, assimilating, you know, as much as I could. You know, I mean, I had good teachers, you know. I think that from being in, you know, I always say I'm in the family business, you know, I had the right type of personality to listen and to learn. And it's, you know, it's funny, Mickey Dolenz's parents were both in the business. So when he says it in an interview, I grew up in the family business, I know exactly what he's talking about.
Oh, okay. You were talking about Madonna, a couple of Run DMC.
Yeah, I mean, Run DMC was actually the first account that I had when I started, you know, my company formally in 1984. And how these guys found out about me, I have no idea. It was actually a label called Profile Records, which went on to become, in the late 80s, the #1 kind of rap label. You know, and they had a huge record with Run This Way from Run DMC. I'm actually looking at the gold record on my wall from that. And I mean, it was a very exciting moment because, you know, they recorded this with Aerosmith, who were kind of in a lull. You know, they weren't as high profile as they have been. Mm-hmm. So they took a chance. You know, Rick Rubin, the producer, who was going to NYU at the time. You know, you had Rick Rubin there, you had Aerosmith there, you had Run DMC there. I was not there for all the recording sessions, but when I was there, it was just an electric environment. I mean, you knew something was going to happen. You didn't know what, but something was going to happen.
Right.
And, you know, they came up with the idea of redoing that song, and the rest is history. And that kind of brought Aerosmith back. I mean, it solidified Run DMC as a legitimate recording act.
Walk This Way, right? That was that was a great rendition. That was there. That was them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, Rick Rubin, who not the easiest person in the world to get along to. I mean, he kind of marches to his own inner drum, if you will. He did a fantastic production job on that. And of course, you know, he's gone on to work with, you know, many huge names. But he was an interesting producer. I remember thinking at the time, this is a guy I would like to work with. And unfortunately, it never came to pass. You know, he went on to produce some fantastic albums. Unfortunately, I can't recall one right now, but he, you know, I know he was doing a Crosby, Stills and Nash album of cover versions, and apparently it didn't work out, but I would love to hear what he did. And one day it will come out, you know, come out as a bootleg or a Christmas album or something, but a terrifically inventive producer.
We were talking about the different types.
I'm talking about Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin, and then we mentioned Madonna, but we were talking earlier about there's two types of clients. I'd like you to tell me about that.
Well, you know, it still happens today. You have the A type of client who will come in, you know, with a lot of money, but the client tells you what to do, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. Then there's the B type of client who will come in and sit and listen, and collectively we will formulate a plan. You know, when we were involved with Debbie Gibson from Long Island, I met her when she was 15. She had all her success when she was just turning 18. Mm-hmm. Still holds the record, believe it or not, to this day, of the youngest performer ever to have a #1 pop record, Lost in Your Eyes, to have produced it, and to have performed it. She still holds that record today.
Really? Wow.
And she's out on this New Kids on the Block mixtape tour with Tiffany, with Naughty by Nature, Salt and Pepper, New Kids on the Block, and Debbie. And the tour is doing great business. I'm hopefully going to see it next Sunday. I've had other clients who I've had them go to shows, and they were blown away.
I went to a New York Knicks game in 1985 Christmas Day when the Knicks, I know you remember that game, because Debbie Gibson sang the national anthem.
I was there.
And do you remember that game? The Knicks were down by 26, like going into the third period. And that was that fury. And I was a big Celtic fan, you know. And I was next to Debbie Gibson because me and my brother were like, you know, we had the upper deck seats, but we always tried to sneak down, as you do when you're kids. Right. And she was right next to me going on to sing the national anthem. And I was like, wow, look at this young girl. And so you, that's interesting. You were.
You know what I remember about that night? I don't really remember the game.
Okay.
But I remember, because I'm sort of mildly interested in basketball. I mean, I'm not a Jack Nicholson season holder, but it was the first time that I had ever been on the floor. Mm-hmm. And that was terrifically exciting. And my memory is that we ended up, staying on the floor to watch the rest of the game. And that was, I mean, that makes a big difference, right? I mean,
it's a whole different game. It's a whole different game on the floor.
Yeah.
It's a lot quicker too. Doesn't the game go fast when you're down there?
Oh yeah. And you really feel like you're part of the game.
You feel like they could pass you the ball, right? You're like right in there, right? Okay, that's funny.
I mean, I can see why Nicholson goes. I mean, obviously he enjoys the sport, but it's like he's in the game.
I had front row seats in the Nets during all those years, and then Jordan came into it was on my wife's lap. We were right behind the basket, Well, and I mean, after you sit there, it's hard to sit up,
Yeah, but, I haven't been, in that position at a basketball game since, and I mean, I don't go to a lot of games, but it as we're saying, it is a big difference. So. And
David, tell me about. I got to ask you, like Madonna, like what's she like? What was it like working with her? I mean, she's pretty big time.
Well, we hooked up with Madonna when she first came to New York City from Detroit, her home base in Detroit. And
who was her original manager? Remember the guy's name that discovered her? He was from Brooklyn. Do you remember him?
Well, her original manager was a woman, Camille. I don't remember the last name, but she had a number of managers.
Or some guy signed her to some big contract. I don't know, but it doesn't matter.
Well,
I can't think of it.
There was a DJ in New York City called Mark Kamens that played at, it was either Danceteria or the Mud Club. And he kind of championed Madonna, introduced her to Seymour Stein, who had
That's the guy, Seymour Stein from Coney Island. That's
right. She had already made an impact in the kind of, Lower East Side scene in New York.
Okay.
But she didn't put out a record on a major label. And it's kind of still like that today. Everyone has their own independent label. But the difference is that once you graduate to the major labels, there's money for ads and there's money for radio. I mean, it all starts with a good song still. But once you have that good song, who's going to take it to radio? How's it going to get to radio? How's it going to get to the media? How is she going to get booked at clubs? So there's got to be, a network, and they kind of call it, today like Team Ray. Who's on your team? You got the PR guy, you got the promotion guy, you've got, the booking guy. I mean, it doesn't have to be, 9 people. It can be 2 people. It can be 3 people. But I mean, everything today is just so kind of, ordered, to a certain degree. I mean, the guy who does radio doesn't do media. The guy who does media doesn't do radio. Mm-hmm. So you really need all those components to, introduce a new group, introduce a new record. And I'm just talking about when you have a good record, I mean, think about it. You and I could write a great record, but I mean, what's the next step after that? Who's going to take it to the labels? Who's going to take it to the clubs? Who's going to take it to the media? I mean, you basically need a team to do that. And again, it doesn't have to be 9 people. It can be 1 person. It can be 2 people, but they've got to be qualified. I meet so many people today new on the scene. And as I said before, I've been doing this for a year. A year? I mean, you barely made an inroad in a year.
Right. Right. Well, I say I had I'm sure there's, as you always hear, there's so much talent out there that never make it. Even they're probably more talented than some of the ones that do make it.
Absolutely.
And say someone has something that would be a hit, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of hits that just never made it to the air. I mean, naturally. What do you do? It's like, hey, Dad, I got this great song here. What do I do now? Like what's a step? Like what do you do?
Well, you need to find, that person. It can be male, it can be female, who can kind of make that bridge or be the bridge between your product and the labels. I mean, radio will not play it unless it's, officially released. It used to be it would have to be on a major label. These days, I mean, you can record something in your living room, and if it's good, it can be played somewhere. I mean, college radio, I mean, all the internet stations, I mean, they're, and again, 35 years ago, I mean, no one had a computer. So the choices were very limited. You need to connect with the right person who has the right connections and believes, in your song, I mean, that's why all the winners on American Idol and all the winners on The Voice, most of them, you never hear about them again. And why is that? It's because they haven't met, the right people who can make the transition from winning something like that, or even being number two, to getting a record deal, with a significant label. I mean, there used to be 8 major labels. Now I think there are 2, But, there are less labels. I mean, there are more outlets. I mean, whether it's, Spotify or Apple or this or that, there are more platforms available. But you've got to hook up with that one knowledgeable person and basically, trust him. He's got to trust you and you got to trust him. I mean, it's, but it has always been like that. I mean, this business, fraught with lawsuits. I mean, the Tommy James book and this book and that book. And most of those stories are true, unfortunately. I mean, if you write a hit song, that's a valuable piece of property, and, in some cases, people have lost that property, You remember the musician Dave Mason, guitar player?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He had a big song in I think it was the mid-'80s called We Just Disagree. And he didn't write it. Someone in his band wrote it, but he sang it perfectly. I think it was a top 5 hit. And I'm a fan. I was a huge fan of him in college. I still listen to him today, and I happened to be out to dinner with him one night with a group of people. And We Just Disagree came on the radio, and he looked up, he looked at me, he said, "Boy, I never should have sold the copyright on that song." Sometimes you have to, you have to do stuff. I don't know if it's it's a business decision. Anyway, it's if you create something and you give up those rights, sometimes they'll come back and bite you. Know where. Right.
Right. Well, that brings me to, I'm going to ask you this, and then I'm going to go into my hit and miss word association.
Okay.
But, loyalty. I mean, does it exist in this business? Tell me about that.
It does, but not to the degree it should. I've been with performers who get to a certain place and they begin to, think they did it all themselves. And believe me when I tell you, it's never just one person. Usually, there's a manager, there's a PR person, there's a promo person. I mean, it takes a village, and unfortunately, some artists feel entitled, and they think they did it all. And those types of artists, they're out there. It's just unfortunate. Now, you take Mickey Dolenz. I've been with Mickey since 1994, so I think it's about 14 or 15 years. We work very well together. And Mickey, for one, just happens to be a really smart guy, and he can really see it for what it is, But a lot of people can, and I think that's just the nature of the business. And I'm sure it happens in all businesses.
Now you hear stuff,
you don't need you anymore. I can do it. Thank you for your service. You're out.
Oh.
And it's a shame, when that happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You hear the artists losing their money too. I guess not as much as you hear Billy Joel's manager takes all his money. Does that happen a lot, or is that more rare? Where?
Well, I think it happened to Billy Joel several times, and we'll keep my personal feelings about Billy Joel out of this conversation.
Okay.
Stuff like that does happen. I mean, Tommy James and the Shondells, he actually wrote. I can't quite recall the name of the book. But, I mean, this guy was, he really went through the ringer. And you can't help but read that book and just, feel sorry for the guy. I mean, he's still performing. He just came out with a new record, but, I mean, it's not, it's not 1972 anymore. I mean, his genre of music, unfortunately, kind of falls in that oldies category. But things happen, things happen. It's, you've got to stay current. I think loyalty is important, So to answer your question, it is there, but not to the degree it should be.
Okay. Just always curious.
I'm being very diplomatic, right?
That's good. That's good. I always wonder because it seems like there's that peak. All these great artists, like when they're in their 23 to 29. It's like all those huge, Billy Joel, Springsteen, McCartney. All these guys have that run, and then it's and then once in a while they might have some, but it's never that magic that they had. Is there something to that, or or do you peak at some point being these musicians?
Well, I think there is. I mean, unfortunately. Once you hit the top, there's only one way to go, And, I mean, artists, like a Bruce Springsteen have been able to maintain it because I think, his team is very sharp. I mean, he's got a great manager in John Landau. And, I mean, you got to look at have to look at a career in a long-term way. I mean, even many of the disco acts, I mean, most of them just released one big record. I mean, honestly, Ray, I can't think of any other artist outside of maybe a Madonna or a Cyndi Lauper who really kind of survived that whole era. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, you don't really know how you maintain it until you're in it, and it's a tough thing to do. That's why you've got to have good people around you. Have a good lawyer for one.
Okay.
Have a good manager, but just have a network of people that you can turn to when the career does shift a little bit. I mean, you're talking about Mickey, maybe they peaked, but these 12 shows in Australia, and the last one was at the Sydney Opera House, packed, sold out. I saw a video of it, and that music is kind of timeless. When Mickey does a show now, they're literally fans from 8 to 80, and that, for me, took a little getting used to, because it was just such a wide array of ages,
Yeah, right.
But I mean, think about it. If you can pull in an audience like that, and and Mickey does about 40 shows on his own a year.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, that's phenomenal.
I got to see one. I saw the Monkees once, like in 1987, but you got me going.
Well, I think it's time for another one. I mean, unfortunately, Mickey will not be in the New York area. And you're based here, or you're based?
I'm in New Jersey. New Jersey Shore. Yeah.
He will be doing shows in that area in 2019. I mean, we're actually working on the itinerary right now. Nah. He's literally booked through February 2019. Amazing.
You mean 2020?
I mean 2020. Yes.
Okay.
2020.
Okay.
It's hard for me to say 2020. It's like the ABC program 2020. But,
the 1900s were so easy to say the year 1980s, but the 2000s are a little. I'm still working through it too. All right, a little fun. My hit and miss, my word association. This is I call this the hard part. I get to really reveal my guest on this. You up for this now, David? Ready?
I hope so.
Okay.
I'm going to give it the old college try.
College try. Okay. All right. Favorite color?
Blue.
Okay. If you were on a deserted island and you had to bring 2 musical CDs with you, what 2 would you bring?
Right. I think, one would definitely be Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I used to work for Elton John's company, and that album I've been listening to a lot lately. And the other one, it could be Brian Ferry. I've been listening to a lot of Brian Ferry. Love Brian Ferry.
Did you meet Elton John when you worked there?
Yeah. I actually took Debbie Gibson in 1987 to an Elton John concert. We went backstage, and there is Billy Joel. So we're talking, or they're talking. I'm kind of watching this, and Elton comes over to me. He says, "Is it okay if Debbie comes out and sings for the encore Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds with Billy and I?" I said, "Absolutely."
What are you going to say? No?
Yeah. What am I going to say? And I stood on stage and I watched this. I mean, there were tears in my eye. I actually watched it with Debbie's mom, who was her manager at the time, and I mean, we teared up. I mean, Billy Joel is Debbie's favorite artist. There's the Long Island connection, obviously, but she was enamored of Billy. And I think she still is. I don't work for her any longer or work with her, but we're actually still in touch, and in many ways tighter than we were when I worked with her. Now figure that out.
Hey,
weird.
Sometimes you get divorced from, not that there was divorce, but then you get along with the wife better afterwards.
Right.
I don't know.
She is on the verge of making, she's 48 now. She's not, the 18-year-old Debbie. But 2020 is going to be an exciting year for her. You heard it here first.
Oh, okay. Mark that down. 2020, Debbie Gibson. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Was Elton?
2020 will be here before we know it, right?
It will be. It will be.
Just awesome.
Well, I was born in '60, so when I was a kid, I always figured I'm going to go to 2040. I always thought that was pretty long, man. I'm getting close to it now. I don't like this. But
no, I know.
Elton must have been fun though, at least, right? I mean, he seemed like a fun guy. I don't know, just the impression is he.
He is.
Yeah,
he is.
just,
I mean, you know what has always amazed me about him? The way, I mean, he can hear something, he'll sit down and play it. He has perfect pitch, like Debbie has perfect pitch. I don't know if Billy has perfect pitch, but I mean that's really something to see. Someone coming into a studio, walking into the, the studio part of the studio, putting on the headphones and just knocking it out in one take. Probably because I can't do it, so I look at it and it just blows me away.
Right. But to them, it's like no big deal, probably, because they got the gift or whatever. If you were in a foxhole, no family members though, who would be in that foxhole with you? If to pick one person.
Wow, well, that's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
No one comes to mind.
Okay. Well, first word that comes to your mind, and that's what it is. That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Favorite movie?
I mentioned Nicholson. I mean, Chinatown, any Jack Nicholson movie. I did like the first 3 Star Wars movies. But it probably would be a Nicholson movie. Probably Chinatown.
Okay. Did you like Cuckoo's Nest?
I loved it.
Okay.
I like Chinatown more.
Okay.
I think John Huston was in it and Polanski was in it, and that last line, it's Chinatown, Jake. I mean, that just floored me.
Well, I think I have an idea who your favorite actor is. If it's not Nicholson, who's your favorite actor? And if it is Nicholson, who's your favorite actress?
Well, I think it probably is Nicholson, although I've been, believe it or not, and then be people out there who won't believe this, but Kevin Costner.
What about Kevin Costner?
No,
he's your favorite actor.
He's been in, I mean, he's just phenomenal. There was a movie a few years ago, Hidden Figures, about the women who kind of, made NASA work, and he was just excellent at it. And I actually saw the thing he did with Woody Harrelson, based on the Bonnie and Clyde. I think it was on Netflix. The name escapes, and he was excellent, excellent. Favorite actress? I mean, I like Meryl Streep. I like Nicole Kidman.
Meryl's always up there. Meryl's always up there.
Yeah. I've been watching the sequel to Big Little Lies. From the first Big Little Lies. But I have to tell you, the best thing I've seen on TV, besides that, has been the Fosse Verdon, Sam Rockwell, Michelle Williams, I think. Just phenomenal. And I knew Bob Fosse, so I kind of watched it. And
okay.
Sam Rockwell got Bob Fosse down from the comb over, with his hair to this. I mean, it was scary good.
Fosse, was he like? You always get the impression he was like a little bit on the crazy side.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Bob Fosse. When you were in a room with him, he talked about one thing, Bob Fosse, and it was a little, overwhelming, But he had Oscars and he had the Tonys to be able to pull it off.
Right. Okay. Lennon or McCartney? I'll give you that one.
I think Lennon.
Okay.
Lennon.
I'll go a little step further. Why Lennon? What was it about Lennon?
Say that again?
Why Lennon? What was it about Lennon?
Just his take on lyrics and, the way he was, his music. I love. I mean, you can put on a John Lennon song today, and it might sound a little dated, but boy, it is a good record. Then I've actually been listening to a lot of Imagine, and just the players he had on there and the songs on there, just phenomenal. I actually worked when I was in college for, I went up to Apple Records one day just asking for a job, and somehow
that's cool.
I ended up working. Remember when they were going to throw Lennon out of the country, or they wanted to?
Yeah, in 72.
They started, the committee for John and Yoko, and I worked for them while going to college.
Wait, you worked for who?
The committee for John and Yoko.
They actually had a committee for them. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah,
okay. I think Alan Klein, if you remember that name.
I remember the name. Yep.
And, they had a great office down on Broome Street in New York, which I still pass. Yoko owned the building. She still owns the building. God knows what's going on in there now. But it was, I met Lennon, met Yoko,
You got to tell me about that. That's pretty cool. Like, tell me about Lennon and Yoko.
He came down, he walked in, thanked everyone for for what they were doing, and then that was it.
Oh, okay,
his
quick.
presence was just overwhelming.
The charisma or whatever, is that what you would call it?
Say that again?
The charisma or the presence?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was like an icon, musical icon, walking into your living room briefly, and then walking out.
Was he not tall? I get the feeling he wasn't wasn't a big guy, right, Lennon? I don't know why I'm asking this, but
no, I mean he was. I'm back then. I think I was 5'9". I'm now 5'8". I think he was somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay. Okay. Well, what's your favorite Lennon song? Then I'll give you the next hit in this.
I like "Jealous Guy" a lot. That Brian Ferry covered and did a phenomenal job on. Of course, "Imagine." There's a song off, I think, the Plastic Ono Band album that he did called "I Don't Want to Be a Soldier."
Yeah, right.
It's a phenomenal song.
Right. Right.
And I'm a liner guy note, or that liner note guy, who's playing piano and just phenomenal players. Phenomenal. I mean, you know the name Nicky Hopkins?
Sounds familiar. I can't really place it, but it sounds familiar.
He has since passed away, but played piano for the Stones and for the Beatles, and just again the type of guy could hear it once, sit down, and just do his own thing, and did it brilliantly. So,
what was the best advice you ever received? You ever got?
The best advice, this is a good, I've been asked this before, and I can't remember. No, actually, there used to be this group, Kid Creole and the Coconuts, that I worked on when I was at a little label in New York before I started my company. And Z Records, ZE, they had a lot of the avant-garde groups in New York, and for a time, I was just enamored with it. I do remember his advice was, which I still use to this day, go with your gut.
Ooh, okay. Simple, but a lot of people don't go with their gut.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think first impressions really mean a lot, and if you meet someone and you instantly like them, I don't have to go work for them, but I mean, think it out, feel it out.
Right. Okay. Ocean.
Go with your gut. That's it.
Go with your gut. Okay.
I have to write this down so the next time I'm asked. No, I remember.
That's, I don't know why. I'm sure it's why people don't go with their gut, It's just interesting why you wouldn't do it, but a lot of people don't.
Well, I just, I think in this day and age, I mean, there's, politically, there's just so much going on. It's a lot to think about. So a lot of people don't go with their gut.
They're torn all different ways. They want to maybe please that guy, or there's a lot of stuff going on.
I think, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, when I started doing this, I mean, there may be about 7 publications, key publications. Now there's about 3,700 key publications. I mean, there's internet. I mean, it's funny. I do say to a lot of people when I got into the PR end of it, I really didn't think there'd be this much work. But I mean, the PR component has just grown and grown. I mean, you've got the internet and you've got the blogs and you've got Instagram, and we use all that. It took us a minute to kind of catch up. I remember standing on the corner in front of my office with a manager we had done some work for, and his whole thing, you got to get a computer, you got to get this, you got to get that, and he was right. I mean, this is a long time ago, and I think overnight, we got everything we needed, and we got caught up in Facebook and this. Remember the MySpace?
Yes.
I was having a discussion with someone about that last night. I mean, it's come and gone.
Right.
But you needed, a MySpace page, and you needed this, and we use all those tools now, and they're really, really valuable, For a new artist that's written a song, maybe produced something. I mean, he can get it out there on his own, through digital means. I mean, you still need the promotion, you still need the publicity, and you still need this, you still need a good lawyer, but you can at least get it out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They do that 30 years ago.
Right. It's amazing. You got to keep thinking back. You think, in 85 there was the internet, but there wasn't, till probably even mid-90s,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, ocean. What comes to mind when you hear ocean?
Ocean. I actually used to have a house on the east end of Long Island, right on the ocean, and when I drove out there with my wife and daughter on Friday nights, that was the first sound I heard, and I knew it was going to be a quiet weekend. The city's gotten very noisy. Where I live, very noisy. I mean, I know it's progress. I can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it, but it's still nice to kind of have that peace and quiet, if only for a few hours.
So that sound of the ocean, that whatever that.
Yep.
I like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Favorite sport?
Favorite sport? Actually, I've been getting into sailing. Good friend of mine, has had a sailboat for the last 5 years, and we'll go out, and it's very quiet. You got to go really far out. But once you get there, it's very, very quiet. You hear that sound of the ocean again.
Right. Okay.
So, and that's something, honestly, sailing I was never into. It looked like a lot of work. And you know what? It is a lot of work. But once you do that work and you get out there, it's fantastic. Fantastic.
Okay. All right, a couple more of these.
Okay.
If Well, who was the most famous person? Well, other than Lennon, who was the most famous person you met? Or Meryl Streep? Let's take them out.
Well, I'll tell you a quick funny story. I had taken my daughter about maybe 10 years ago to a screening of the first film by Francis Ford Coppola's son, Roman. Mm-hmm. Happened to have starred Charlie Sheen. I don't remember the title. It was Inside the Mind of Something. It was a quirky movie. I enjoyed it, and there was an after party, and I'm sitting there with my daughter, and Francis Ford Coppola walks in. Mm-hmm. I ran up. I told my daughter, I said, stay here. I said, Daddy's got to do something. And because I'm a big fan of many directors. He's in the list. Couldn't have been nicer. Introduced me to his wife. Invited me to sit at their table. I said, I got to get back to my daughter. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, I should really do this, but I got back to my daughter. But just phenomenal. I mean, think of the movies this guy's in. Apocalypse Now. I mean, that alone, right? I mean, Godfather 1, 2, and 3.
What do you like better, 1 or 2, Godfather?
I think 1 has got to be the real deal.
And what was your favorite scene in that? In 1, Godfather, first Godfather. I know there's a lot of good ones.
When Jimmy Caan gets it, at the toll booth, right?
Yes.
I mean, that was a pretty great scene. I'm a big Al Pacino fan, too. Pacino probably is my number 2 actor. So it was enjoyable, watching him, of course, and just watching Brando. I mean, everything I've seen Brando in, it's Marlon Brando.
Right.
Even that movie he did with Val Kilmer on the island, where he played the renegade inventor. I can't think of the name of it, but he was great in that. I enjoy him.
Have you ever seen that? There's like an uncut version. They play it on TV sometimes. It's like 4 hours,
No.
1 or 2, where they show the whole
4
thing.
4 hours?
Yeah, they show one, and it's like they show the scenes they cut are in this movie. And
do you remember the name of the movie?
In Godfather.
Oh, we're talking about The Godfather.
We're talking about The Godfather.
I have, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's just brilliant.
The scenes that Coppola cut were like perfect because you could tell that they weren't as great as the ones that he kept. And it's like amazing that from my amateur mind, I'm like, wow, he cut like the perfect scenes to make this a perfect movie. It's just kind of funny.
Coppola just did a very, very long interview with one of the Hollywood trade papers. And I mean, it literally took me a half hour to read, but it was just brilliant. And the reason he said he cut it is that the studio, it's too long. It's too long. Cut it. So he was kind of forced into cutting all those scenes out. And I agree.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago. You kind of look back on history a little bit differently now than you did at the time it was being made.
Right. You mean it gets more nostalgic now, or in what way?
Well, I don't know. You're older. You've done more stuff. You kind of look at it differently. You asked me before. When an artist peaks, the reaction now is a lot different than the reaction then. I could have done this. I could have done that. I should have done this. I should have done that. It's very easy to kind of quarterback something. 10, 15, 20 years later.
Right.
I mean, it's a different perspective,
Right.
And I don't know if it's right or wrong. It's just different.
Well, you could watch a movie like 10 years apart, and then you just look at it totally different.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've not seen Chinatown, my favorite movie, in quite some time, and I wanted to pull it up. Now you can pull up everything on the TV. And my wife didn't want to watch it. So, it was either I was going to go into another room, which I wasn't too keen on doing, but I will watch it.
You got to do it at like 3 in the morning, when she's sleeping.
Well, I'll tell you, Ray, those 3 a.m. Mornings or nights,
right?
Very much overrated. When I was doing the disco thing, I mean, I would be getting home at like 8 in the morning, after going to a series of clubs and maybe breakfast and this and that. It's hard to do now, and it really kind of takes away from the day.
Right.
You got to sleep, you got to sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, I still try to go out. I think to keep yourself relevant is, very important. It's a little harder to do now, than it was 20 years ago. But I mean, I still do it, I mean, it's like that old lottery saying, you got to be in it to win it.
Yeah.
And in it, you're not winning anything.
Right. It's like Wayne Gretzky had a thing. You miss every shot you don't take.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
On this famous thing, if you had to meet, not famous, but if you had to meet one person tomorrow in the whole art world, music world, any world, who would it be? David, you could meet this guy tomorrow, dead or alive.
Yeah, I have an answer for you. You know who it is? Andy Warhol.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
I'm a big art guy.
Okay.
I own a lot of art. I mean, unfortunately, not any of the big names, and I don't own a Warhol, but as time marches on, I see how significant personality he was in so many different things. In Pittsburgh, there's the Andy Warhol Museum. That's where he was born. It's 6 floors. I was down there quite some time ago, but I started on the first floor and went up to the 6th floor. And you know what I did when I was done with the 6th floor?
What?
I started it all over again.
Oh.
It was that good.
Okay. It was that 6 whole floors, and you went up again.
Yep.
I think of that Elvis.
A lot of stuff in there.
That Elvis cowboy one, right? He had the Elvis with the cowboy thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he did all the covers for the Interview magazine, for quite a while. And every single cover was on display. And it was overwhelming.
Did you like Van Gogh and all that era, or any particular era?
Not really. I'm more kind of a Basquiat is a big favorite of mine. Mark Rothko is a big favorite of mine. The older artists, never really got into it.
Okay.
Never really got into it.
Okay.
I saw the Van Gogh, movie with. That terrific actor, Willem Dafoe. He was fantastic, but I didn't change my way of thinking,
Right.
It was from another time, another place. I see the motivation, but not for me.
Okay. I meant to ask you this before. I might as well ask you now, because I'm kind of curious. What was Madonna like quickly? Like, what was she like?
Madonna, I started to answer you. I didn't, I'm sorry. She listened to everybody. She gathered a group of, DJs, which back then really kind of paved the way for a lot of the major label artists. Rolling Stones went disco, Rod Stewart went disco, and a lot of that really started with the DJs who back then were really, really important. So, I mean, she had a coterie, for lack of a better word, of, people she really listened to. And to me, she was like a sponge. She soaked everything up, and then it came out Madonna-fied.
Okay, right.
And I don't care for her current product right now, but I will go back and listen to Vogue, and I'll listen to this, and I'll listen to that. And I thought, she made some fantastic records. Again, sonically sound a little dated today, but you go back to a lot of her early stuff, as I have, and it's just terrific.
I always picture her like the female. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but like a female Michael Jackson, like for the '80s.
Yeah, like I could see it. I mean, her real first manager, a guy by the name of Freddie DeMann, who I believe has since passed on, was Michael Jackson's manager. And she, as I said before, I mean, she went through a lot of people, and sometimes you got to do that until you find the right one.
Oh, okay. Yep.
I mean, it's not like going in a supermarket and you say, I'm going to take one manager and one people. You've got to find the right people who are in sync. Another big group back in the day,
right.
You know, with what you want and what do you want to do, and you want to write, you want to go to writers. What do you think about producers? What do you think about recording studios? And is that you?
Yeah, I don't know what that was. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just sort of beat. Was that me?
Yeah.
You know, it's not. You're just going to walk in. You're going to find one. I mean, it's a painstaking process. And again, you know, some managers have taken more than they should have, and that's why managers get a bad rap. But you know, you look at someone like Johnny Mathis, been in the business like 50 years with the same label. Has had the same manager in those 50 years.
Wow.
Same thing with Barbra Streisand. She's had the same manager for decades. Why? Because they work together very well.
Okay. I love talking to yourself and people in the business, because I always thought the Beatles got lucky because they had everybody was in sync. It seemed they had a great manager that was really for them. You know, George Martin. Is that true? I mean, they happened to got lucky, I guess, that everybody was like almost a perfect fit for them at that time.
You know what? You make a lot of your own luck.
Okay, right.
I mean, the Beatles had a sound. They had an image. They had just everything that no one had really had before, you know. And you know, it's like catching lightning in a bottle. You know, you get the right manager, you get the right producer, you get the right sound, I mean, it's hard. You know, if it was so easy, everyone would do it, and everyone can't do it. You know, a lot of people have tried to do it and have tried and failed.
Right.
I mean, we don't have to go into, but I'm sure we could be on the phone for the next hour just listing, you know, one-hit wonders and groups that you hear today and you don't hear about tomorrow. It's a tough business, you know, but I mean, people are still making money. New artists are constantly being discovered. And if you write a good song, I mean, hopefully it will get there. It all starts with a good song. With
a song. Okay. And my last one for my hit and miss. You ready for my last hit and miss one here?
Right.
Okay. David, if you had one wish in the world, and I'm a genie going to grant your wish tomorrow, what would your one wish be?
Wow. Probably to get my house at the beach back.
Oh, okay.
So we got the house, and my daughter, who's now 28, you know, back then would come with us, but, you know, they get to a point where they don't want to go, they want to do this, and it just became fiscally not a good thing to do, you know. But it you know, it was nice. Probably not the answer you were expecting, right?
Well, yeah, I get all types of answers to that, so that's, you know, that's your thing. I mean, that's great. It shows me how much you love the beach and the ocean. You know,
it was nice. You know, I actually where I live now, I'm 2 blocks from the water. The water is in New York, but it's water nonetheless. It's very peaceful.
Yeah. Yes. David, give you, I guess, the last word. Whatever. Anything you want to add or mention or anything coming up or
Ray? I think we covered it all. I'm looking at my notes here. I think we covered it all.
Okay. Great. I appreciate you coming out. I'd like to thank Zach Martin that invited you out, and it was quite enjoyable for me on this hour. So I really appreciate you doing this, David.
Okay. For me too, Ray. It was my pleasure.
That was David Salidor. I am Ray K. Catch you next time.